Well, thank you, Barry, for inviting me. Good morning, everyone. I guess let's just get started here. If this is going to work. Does that work? Hey, there we go. Okay, so we've heard already. We've heard already from four really excellent photographers so far. And I've enjoyed all of them. So today we're going to switch gears a little bit and bring the bar down a little bit. And so, I thought it was interesting that both Kevins that have spoken so far focused their talks around what made a good photograph in their opinions. And I thought that was interesting that there must be a Kevin connection there. So what I thought I'd do this time around is talk a little more generally. I just by happenstance, when I was putting this talk together, I saw a presentation by a guy named Brian Peterson of photography, who was talking about the elements of design and what made a good composition and that kind of thing. And I thought, well, that dovetailed in pretty well. So this is his list of traits of a photograph that made a good, in quotes, photograph. There's a couple you could add here, like contrast and light, but line, texture, shape, form, pattern, color, those are all sort of what you look for in an image. So before I launch into that, a little bit about me. How far back do we want to go? When I was a kid, I wanted to be an architect. But by the time I got into my teens, it was like, okay, so every really cool building I've ever seen never would have occurred to me, ever. So I thought, well, okay, so if I'm not creative enough to be like a superstar architect, I don't want to draw other people's stuff. So I put that aside. Fortunately, in high school, I had a really good biology teacher. And again, by happenstance, my freshman year, they offered scuba certification as a PE thing. And I went, well, this was the age of Cousteau and Sea Hunt and all that stuff. I was like, yeah, I want to do that. And it's got to be better than running laps. So I went and got a scuba certification. So that sort of dovetailed with my interest in biology. And so I trained as a marine biologist, like every other teenager in the 70s. Everybody wanted to be a marine biologist. So I did that. I went to college at a small school that had their own research vessel and a research program that was going on. So I spent, my whole time going on the boat instead of going to class and doing marine biology. And then I went to graduate school and did all that. And worked in the field for about 20 years. And then I ended up at UC Santa Cruz and then UC Davis doing research on what's called soft money, which means you have to bring in your own contracts to pay your own salary. And around about 2000, the funding agency decided they really didn't need to do this anymore. So no funding, no salary, no job. So rather than try and figure out how I was going to find a contract to pay for myself and my lab assistants and the overhead and drive 2 hours to work every day, I decided maybe the better thing would be to what the modern corporate speak says, pivot. So I pivoted to become a furniture maker and did that full time. And I've been doing that ever since 2001. And that sort of, when I think about it, kind of ties into my interest in architecture early on. It's about shape and form and line and all that stuff. And oddly enough, all those things are important in photography too. So during all of that time, both the marine biology phase and the furniture phase, I've been a quote unquote photographer. And I put that in quotes because for a long time, I was a photographer by virtue of the fact that I had a camera and took photographs. And that was really all. During the first part of my, in my marine biology stage, really the camera was just a tool. I was recording data, I was recording, doing documentary sort of things like, what were we pulling up on the boat? What were we seeing as we were diving, doing all that stuff? And so I had, I bought an Iconos and it was doing all that. It sort of integrated the camera into my research, but not with any artistic flair, of any sort, really. It was more like, what are we seeing? What do we need? How am I going to document all this stuff? I did have I decided to get a close-up lens and a strobe. And so some of this stuff is a little, artsy-fartsy sometimes, but really, basically, it was a tool. Then, basically in the early 90s, when my wife and I finally realized that we both had real jobs and some money coming in, we could start traveling. And when I started traveling, then that's sort of like, okay, I have a camera, I could take it with me. And it was sort of a pain because that was back in the film days and you had to have the lead line bag with 20 rolls of film in it to get through the security, the x-rays. And again, mostly back then, even most of the stuff I was doing was just sort of documentary. Oh, here's a church. Oh, here's a bridge. And so I wasn't really thinking about the artistic end of it as much. As we traveled more and I went on, one of the watersheds for me, which I had heard from other people, was when I went digital. In the early 2000s, digital cameras started coming out, and we had sort of an opportunity to go to Tanzania with a friend of mine's medical team. And the perk at the end of the trip was you got to do a couple of days of safari. So after doing safari once with the film camera and having to juggle all the film and make sure it didn't get lost and Schiphol Airport and all that stuff, I finally got digital. And that sort of pushed me down the path to more artistic, thinking about composition, doing more reading, that kind of thing. So I sort of, was just doing travel photography, and it was okay. Most of it was more documentary than creative. But kind of as I moved on, I got a little more creative and a little more confident. So I started thinking more about composition as we traveled to different spots. So that was sort of the evolution of my use of photography as a medium. And it's interesting because I did, for the first time, for the only time I've ever done a professional portfolio session, a few years ago, the reviewer that was talking to me at one point, we said nice things about what I was showing him, and he said, well, why do you take pictures? Why do you do photography? And like an idiot, I honestly said, well, because I enjoy it. But that really wasn't the right answer. And so I'm still trying to figure out what that answer really is. But really, it comes down to, I like pretty pictures. I don't really have a social or political agenda to my photography. I'm just trying to be creative and, as an outlet, and trying to make pretty pictures. So I also do, because I do most of my photography when we're traveling with my wife and my friends, I try not to be too antisocial. So, they know that when we're hiking, if I lag behind, they just keep going. But I try not to do that too much. So a lot of the stuff that I shoot ends up being in the sort of bedtime to breakfast window, because, we've done all the social stuff, everybody's gone to bed, and it's like, okay, now I can go shoot for myself and spend the time that I want to do. So I have a lot of sunrise pictures. And, this, going back to those elements of design, this one in particular is not a particularly good photo technically. The horizon's in the middle. It's not supposed to do that. There's no cohesive subject in it. You're not supposed to do that either. It doesn't really lead your eye particularly where you want it to go. That's not good either. But it does sort of make an emotional connection because of the color. And when I look at it, I know where I was. I was there, and it was a really cool morning. So a lot of this stuff, even if it doesn't adhere to the elements of design and the things that make a good composition, I still am okay with them. You know, I think they work. And a lot of these, you know, I mean, how trite is that? You know, you've seen it a million times, but still you look at it and you have an emotional reaction. You know where it, you know what you're looking at. This one, you know, it's got good color. It's got that warm, cool juxtaposition that is always we're looking for. And so, you know, again, there's not really too much going on in here, but to me, it has an emotional connection because it's a pretty picture. You know, and so again, a lot of sunrises. Some of these have, you know, more compositional elements than others. I also like to use atmospherics whenever I can. Fog is really your friend. This one has good lines, good texture, good light. You know, your eye kind of knows where to go. So I consider it relatively successful. Again, fog, sun rays, you know, nature is your friend sometimes. And these, you know, most of these are not exotic places. This is just in downtown Felton. The two before that were in my backyard. Sunsets, you know, same thing. You know, the elements of design maybe aren't there, but I still think it's a successful picture. It's got good color, it's got good contrast, you know, whatever. You know, again, more sunsets. They don't always have to have the sun. Again, warm and cool tones go together. There's pretty good lines going on. And sometimes it doesn't have any of it, but it's just a cool image, you know. I mean, it works. It's got the warm and cool. It doesn't really have too many of those elements of design going on, but I still think it's a successful photograph. I also like to try and get the day-night thing where, you know, you've got warm and cool again. So when I can, and it works out, it's very cool. The sun shouldn't get all the credit. I do also shoot the moon, moonrise, moonset. It's always fun to be out there at, you know, odd times of the day. Another moonset. Color, you know, color and contrast are really the driving factors in this one. And when it comes to color and movement, you can't beat an aurora. These have, you know, color, line, and texture all kind of working for them. So that's a pretty successful one. And auroras, you don't have to go, these happen to be in Iceland, but you don't have to go very far, at least not this year. That one on the left is in Half Moon Bay, and the one on the right is in my backyard. Wow. Oddly enough. So yeah, and that also sort of kicks into what I was saying about I end up doing a lot of night work just because it's more convenient. And night work can be really fun. Some clouds, Milky Way, you know, you can't beat it. It's got lots of nice texture to it. These also, you know, same thing. The aurora is there. That aurora in August is there on the left, and so, you know, that ends up being where I'm shooting. And like the one on the left there, I didn't try and plan the lighting in that. It was just somebody walking around with a headlamp, and so it's like, well, okay, I'll take it. And that's sort of what happened on this one. This is out at Toronto Pinnacle. And here I was out, you know, trying to shoot the Milky Way, and everything was nice and dark. And some guy drove into the campsite, you know, the campground, and washed his headlights. And I was like, oh, come on. And then I looked at the photo and I went, well, okay, that works. Yeah. So it's like, okay, I probably shouldn't yell at people so much. Another thing that I like to explore personally is movement, motion. And there are two ends of that. You can go, oops.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Can you go back to the previous photo?
Sure. That one?
Yeah.
Sure.
The one on the full, single picture.
That one?
Yes.
Ah,
There is a line. Dot.
yeah, that's a little meteor.
It's,
Yeah,
that is amazing.
yeah. You have to kind of be careful and be able to tell meteors from airplanes, but that one's a meteor. So anyway, motion. You can either stop motion and get really interesting thing. This is, just a little waterfall at a 3,000th of a second. And you get interesting patterns of splashes and shapes and forms. And I really like that. The way most people do it is looking at motion by integrating motion over time using a slow shutter speed. The cool kids on Instagram call that dragging the shutter. And so, by slowing the shutter speed, you can actually sort of illuminate what's going on in the scene. And, some of these, we go back to the elements of design. This one on the one of the cove, Shark Fin Cove on the left, it's got line, it's got motion, it's got texture. It really, I really like doing that. And the one on the right, again, you get patterns out of the water that you might not see if you're just looking at it in real time. Again, lines, creating lines where there aren't any that draw your eye into the photo. And again, drawing your eye into the photo and taking it back to the back of the scene. And wave action is always great for slow shutter speeds. You get nice movement. You get to see the waves and the dragging down the lines and textures in the sand. But you don't necessarily need ocean waves to show motion. If you're lucky enough to find a little stream with some schmutz floating on the surface, you can see what the eddies are doing as it's flowing down the stream. And you don't actually need water at all necessarily. I mean, this one's got some motion in the water, but it's also got light motion going on. And again, slow shutter speed shows you something that you probably would have seen the fireworks as they were because you're watching them happen. But still, it gives you a different perspective. And again, motion and light. And you don't really need fireworks, motion and light. I also like to look for texture and shadow. Those are always really, really good things to draw you into a scene. Again, texture and shadow. The one on the bottom has the nice, cool, warm juxtaposition. But you don't really even need shadow necessarily. Sometimes you can kind of make your own texture. The texture of the trees was really interesting, but in this one, the leaves, the aspen leaves in the back, were really kind of crunchy and chaotic. So just put a little blur on the leaves themselves, and you get the feeling of what it was like out there without having to worry about so much crunchiness and chaos in the background. Again, line and texture, those are sort of the things that I key on the most. Lines and texture. Everybody knows what that is. And you don't necessarily need, I mean, one of the nice things about line and texture and shade and shadow are you can find them anywhere. Clouds are a great example. I have dozens and dozens and dozens of pictures of clouds just because they're cool looking, and you get a sense of where they're going and what they're doing. More, color and texture. And sometimes even none of those things exist, and it's still kind of an interesting photo. I made a quick mention about going to Tanzania. We've done that a few times, and so I would remiss in putting a few animal pictures in. These aren't Kevin Bowman level pictures, but but you know, this is, like I said, the trip to Africa was what sort of said, okay, I need to get digital and really start paying attention to what I'm doing. So a few animals here and there. And a little bit of creative license in the development at starting to work with Photoshop and trying to bring a little more emotion and feeling into the pictures. And sometimes a little extra creative license in the processing. I also like to look for equivalencies between nature and the built environment. You know, visual equivalencies, and sometimes they just sort of pop out at me. The line and the shape and the form sort of work together. This is sort of the prime example. Stripes are stripes, no matter where you find them. And that sort of leads into going back to my love of architecture. I try and do a lot of architectural photography because that's sort of what my first interest was. And lines play a big trait in that too. You can find lines everywhere. You just have to look for them. Lines and shapes, and taking these into black and white often helps a lot, because this photo, that building is bright red, and it really kind of takes away from the texture to do it in color. So bringing it back to black and white, you're then looking at form and tone and shadow.
Where's that building?
That's in Los Angeles. It's the Peterson Auto Museum, right on Wilshire Boulevard. And so, you know, more just lines and shapes and forms. You can't beat them. Yeah, that was Milan. And there's the Guggenheim in New York. And that's the Legion of Honor. But again, you know, repetitive forms, lines, patterns. Patterns are everywhere. I saw the presentation that I watched said, well, you know, if you find a pattern, fill the frame with it. Don't take anything extraneous. So it really works. You know, find a form, find a pattern, and just fill the frame. Texture plays a lot of a big part in putting a good photo together. Texture and lines. Texture again in the sky and in the building. Also shapes. Shapes are you know, finding interesting shapes are really important to me. I look for them. That's, you know, you can always find interesting buildings.
Where is that?
I'm sorry, this one?
Where? No, the other one.
Going for it, that one?
Yeah.
That is the Modern Art Museum in Bremen. No, in Munich. It's basically looking, it's a circular stairway, and we're looking straight up to the skylight.
The next one.
This one is in Bremen. It's a little science museum thing. And that's BMW headquarters in Munich. But shapes, again, shapes in the cloud, you know, texture in the clouds, shapes and repeating patterns. Also, you know, beyond black and white architecture, I would also be remiss living in Santa Cruz not to shoot waves. But, you know, really everyone with a camera has a good wave shot. And so when I shoot waves, I try and look to see what sort of interesting processing I can do and give them a little more painterly feel, and something that's not just a shot of straight out of camera. So I like to do the waves with textures and a little bit of extra massaging. And we can find some pretty interesting waves here. But again, color and texture and form. Sometimes you get this. These are reflected waves down at Mitchell's. I mean, the one thing that I've always thought when I started picking up a camera and traveling, the other thing that the camera did for me was it fit my personality, which is basically a juvenile Aussie Shepherd. I have no patience. I have no patience, and I need something to do all the time. So the camera gives me something to do. These waves are sort of a test of my patience because you got to sit there and wait and wait and wait. I could never do what Kevin does because I don't have that much patience.
How many pictures is something like that?
Oh, hundreds. Yeah. You shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot, and every once in a while one of them will come up.
How do you bring out the color the way it's set in Photoshop?
It's Photoshop, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I put some filters on them sometimes to add the texture and then bring up the contrast and the color in Photoshop.
It'd be interesting to see the before and after.
Yeah, I thought about that and I forgot to do it, but yeah. You wouldn't like the before.
But it would be that much impressive.
So there are also, I thought I'd just go through a couple of my sort of ongoing projects of photographic interest that are sort of more personal perspective of mine and more artistic interpretation. The first one I call high key, just because I don't really know what else to call it. It started out with some calla lily leaves in our backyard, and they were, really dark green and glossy, and they have this really bright yellow margin around them. And I thought that, the contrast of that really got me. But it was really hard to bring out the textures in the dark areas because it was so dark. And plus the fact that it occurred to me if I wanted to print it, it would cost a fortune with all that black ink. So I got on the idea of, well, let's invert it and we can find the shape and the form without having to worry about all the other stuff. So these are inverted, basically. They're high contrast inverted. And so you get a sense of the shape, which is what I'm really interested in. And they're a lot cheaper to print.
What does inverted?
Inverting from positive to negative. Like in these images, they're really very dark images with light lines in them. So when I invert it in Photoshop, it becomes dark lines on light images. And when you do that, you're able to pull the texture in the leaves out more than if it was in the dark version. And this is a good example. It was really, really hard to see any texture in those leaves in the dark version, but once you flip it, then you can start playing with contrast and tone and see what's going on. And so that led me down the path to, well, what else can we find? And you can sort of highlight the structure of plants that are really cool.
So do you Photoshop the contrast to a higher level?
Yeah, I usually shoot it kind of dark so that I get that contrast and then bring it out in Photoshop. Yeah, a lot of these are fairly heavily processed. And even without inverting them, some of these are just sort of a new perspective. They're dark colored succulents, but when you brighten them up, you can really bring out the edge detail and the tones. And then patterns. The other one I have, another one I have is I call painted because, again, I don't really know what else to call it. And it comes from my love of trees, and that has also was sort of a theme through the last 4 presentations is everybody likes shooting trees because they're really cool and they're really interesting shapes. But I find that a lot of the trees I shoot, especially when they're in a forest situation, it's a very chaotic visual environment. There are leaves everywhere, there are different colors, there's sticks, there's all kinds of crap and corruption going on. So when I look at that photo, it's like, well, yeah, that's a cool looking tree, but you know, it's kind of hard to pick out. So I started playing with Photoshop filters to see what I could do to sort of soften this around. And when I found the oil paint filter, it was like, okay, I can kind of smooth out all of that chaos in the background and still keep the form of the tree. And that's really more towards the intent that I'm trying to show. And it happens to work really well with all kinds of trees. You can introduce movement, you know, visual movement, as well as contrast and shadow.
Nikki, are you
Yep.
essentially painting in your filter?
Yeah, actually, what I'm doing is I'm converting the whole image to the painting, and then masking back the tree itself.
Hmm.
Again, you know, this was a pretty static picture until I softened the leaves and the grass, and it gives it more movement.
Oh, so what you're doing is you're revealing the tree.
I'm revealing the trunk
You can
and the
see more of
branches.
the original,
Right,
but let the rest of it stay.
right.
Okay.
Soften the rest of it, soften the chaos, and then bring the trunk back. Yeah. And you know, the moss gets kind of silky. That tree's not there anymore. And it, you know, it tends to work. It also helps in high contrast environments. It sort of softens it all out. So again, you can see the shape, the form of the tree better without having to worry about all the little crunchy leaves. Again, movement, you know, line and movement, that sort of circular movement around the frame really wasn't there until I started processing it. And it kind of works with the twist of the trunk. And the next one, again, sort of relies on line and shadow. And it's probably the thing that's most directly connected between my two halves, the furniture and the photography. One of the things I do in furniture a lot is veneer work. And one of the classic techniques to use in veneer work is called book matching. You get an interesting, you know, burly type wood, you book match it and you get an interesting pattern. And this series started up at SF MoMA. We were up there, and of course everybody's looking at the art and I'm shooting the building. And there's that really cool ocular window at the top. And I took a bunch of shots of that, and I just wasn't getting what I wanted. It wasn't feeling right. But then I thought about book matching and I went, well, now we've got some symmetry and now we've got an interesting photo. You know, there's more life to it to me than just the half of that. So this sort of went down the rat hole of trying to change the context of an image. With abstracting it and multiplying it and reversing it, I can take something that people may or may not recognize, turn into something completely new, and see how to explore what that could be. Sometimes people look at it and go, oh, I know what that is. And, you know, it's kind of a game. It's like, oh, can I figure out what I'm looking at? And sometimes it's hard to tell for anybody. But it's a fun exercise. And sometimes it comes up with some interesting stuff. That's that same Peterson Museum, just shot from a different angle and then multiplied. Most people figure they know what that is. But it's a different way of looking at it. This one no one ever figures out because that's actually the parking structure at Phoenix Airport. Hence the plane. But I like playing with, you know, perspective and classic ways of looking at things. It's also really good in repeating patterns. You can take the image on the left is King's Cross Station in London, and they have this amazing lattice structure on the ceiling. And I think it looks even better when it's duplicated. So, because I tend to, because of with furniture and other stuff, I tend to look for symmetry. And so sometimes when I don't find it, I just create it. You can also kind of go down the Escher thing. I actually call that one 4MC. And of course, spiral staircases are always ripe for that sort of treatment. But I also realized that, you know, this sort of technique doesn't have to be limited to structures. You can do that with anything. And, you know, most people look at that and go, what the hell am I looking at? Yeah, most people see a tree, and these become, this next set becomes sort of a Rorschach test. And just to sort of point out how these are done, this is the wave with a slow shutter speed, and then you turn it over and flip it, and you've got a tree.
Wow.
And so then the more chaotic the wave, the more interesting the flip. People see all sorts of things in these. When they ask me, what is it? And I go, what do you tell me? What do you think it is? And so it's, you know, it's fun to look at different photos that might not necessarily be that interesting, and then manipulate them and turn them into something really cool. But sometimes it's really just horsing around. So thank you, that's it. So thank you for having me.
Quite an array of images to share with you. My first experiences in photography was working with Ansel Adams. Anybody ever go to Friends of Photography in Carmel and view his work? He was a great inspiration to me, and I learned how to see the light. And when we ask the question, what is photography about? It's seeing the light. It's being aware of the shadows and the light areas. I learned to work with the zone system. What is that? It's a gradation, 11 points from pitch black to white. And it was quite a challenge. I created a portfolio of work. I titled this Highway 1 Revisited. I visited 3, sometimes 4 locations for a whole year. I went to the same spot repeatedly. And what I discovered is that nothing stays the same. Everything changes. The clouds in the sky, the tide, the ocean, what's in the foreground. I went to exactly the same spot. Keep in mind, I am working with a 4x5 film sheet camera. Cameras like this on the tripod, black cloth over my head. When you look through, you see the image upside down. And I was also taught to look at every corner in your frame. I carried 8 to 10 wooden plates with film in a backpack. And so I had basically had 18 to 20 image, that's it, to take. That was limited. Not to the thousands I take now when I go out photographing birds. Everything changes in the landscape, as in life. Nothing stays the same. The movement of the water, the images, what you see in the foreground. Here, a wonderful piece of kelp appeared. And I was meticulous to compose it so that the lighthouse would be seen. And then, oh my gosh, lo and behold, a bird. This is in the 80s. And I was not into bird photography. The last thing I ever thought I would photograph, oh, sorry, let me show you the bird. Was very, very happy about this bird because it was a whole dance that if somebody was up on the cliff videotaping me, it would have been a riot. Here I am, black, pretty much a black hood, you know, cape over my head with the camera, and there's a bird on shore. And the bird is a common murre. I found out later from a ranger that they eat a lot or they become grounded. So this bird is picking itself up and moving closer to land, to me. So I also, you know, I have a fixed lens on that camera, moving back. We did the whole dance. So this was my favorite one of almost the whole series, because there was that interaction with wildlife. San Gregorio State Beach. And, oh my gosh, look at all this kelp. Look at the seaweed, the gnarliness, the tangle, the rubbery feeling. And with black and white and in developing your sheet film, one gauges the contrast range in your scene, and you would develop or you would expose your film so that you're able to catch the highlights, the white areas, and the very dark areas. And then you would develop your film according to the contrast range. It was very technical, very intricate work, but it really helped me to see the light, to be aware of the dark and the light that is around us. In black and white, one really becomes very focused on your form, your shapes, the textures that are there. And here, oh my gosh, what happened here? There's a huge bull. Maybe you've seen that at a beach sometime. I've never seen that. It was as though an alien ship came and just hollowed out a big circle in the center, and then kelp. I mean, really, I get chills when I think about it. It was just astonishing. So the landscape never stays the same. And to my great happiness, a skeleton. Oh boy, a skeleton right in my same spot. It really is a wonderful exercise to go to the same location repeatedly and see what you can achieve and capture. Now we move into the digital world. And Ansel, by the way, loved it. He was aware of it. He goes, you know, it's amazing that I believe with digital photography, one can actually manipulate, and he manipulated his prints. Don't think that he was a complete purist. He would darken the sky, he would lighten the bottom. And another thing that I learned from him was that do not settle on your first creation. And now with digital imaging, it's very easy to do. So I would make an image, and then I would have 5 created in a different manner, darken the sky or lighten the rocks, whatever. And he said, you know, I don't know which one I like yet. I'm going to live with these until I will know. I will know. And it really slowed me down. This is, of course, Yosemite Valley View, another place that I would go repeatedly to every time I was there. And now we're working with black and white digital. And with digital, I became the lab. At that time, many professional photographers, I did have a business, portrait business, they went out of business. They could not handle the load of all the processing. Because think about it, you shoot your film, send it to the lab, you get a contact sheet back, you see this and this, I want that or that, back to the lab, they print it. Now I am responsible for, or I hire somebody. So if you have a very high volume photography studio, they have to have the ability to hire people to do it and to be able to, you know, produce. So this is, where are we? This says it's Zion Canyon and the light is almost coming at us. So this is where with your cameras, you cannot always trust the exposure. they will give you false readings according to an 18% grade. So if you want a black, you need to expose for that. And if you want white, this is black and white infrared, and it is digital. In those days, this is a long time ago, 2000, right? I had a black filter, completely, you couldn't see through the camera. And I would set up the camera tripod, get my scene, compose it, and you have to set your focus off. Anybody shoot black and white film? And even though this was digital, you still had to offset for your focus. Then I put a completely solid black filter. It's one of the hardest things to do. You can't see through the viewfinder anymore. You take your image. So this is another that was taken in that manner. And what is black and white infrared film? It records light that is that infrared ray. That's about all I know about that, but it makes any plant or leaf that is photosynthesizing white. And this is where are we now? We are in Fairyland Canyon, Bryce, with Nancy, my friend here. And the sand now looks almost like snow. Notice the pine trees. It transforms an image to be very, very mystical. Joshua Tree, great place for exploring, having great adventures. And that's what photography has done for me. I had to write everything down. My mentor always told me to write everything down. I like talking off, but I do want to share that photography for me has been a journey to see the beauty, and why do I photograph? To share my vision with others, or even for me to see that vision, and then to educate and share. I've taught at Cabrillo College photography. I've done private workshops. I've done group workshops, and I still have that love and passion and joy. And that's what it's about. It's personal. I get a lot of joy, a lot of passion. And when I'm out there looking for a rock or a scene to photograph or a bird, hey, guess what? I don't feel my pain, creaky knees or the soreness or that. And I know we all have pains and they move around and change from this spot to that spot. And that's part of, I'm sorry to say, it's going to happen to all of us, aging, right? We're not going to be 20 or 30 forever, and how to move through that. So for me, it's the joy and the passion of photographing. And this is another at Joshua Tree. And with black and white, there's something that does happen where, one is able to really notice the detail. And this is a leaf that has a lot of texture going on. And here you have Point Lobos, trees. I mean, you've probably been to this spot. It's been there for who knows how long, hundreds of years. And this is a digital image. This was created, what's the year? It says 2021, so relatively new. This was changed to be like a sepia or a brown tone print with a dark edge, look to make it look like it was old film. Then I created a portfolio of work. Now this is done with film, I was wondering what else would black and white infrared film do. I created a handmade portfolio case, and it's lined with fabric, and it has this body of work was exhibited at Pacific Grove Art Center, title page, and it holds the actual prints. Thank you. The title, Rumor of Angels. I discovered that the infrared film would make the black skies blue, bright blue, and the marble of the statues. It became an adventure to find a statue glowing, as you can see there. And you can see I am all into prints, and that's what Ansel really taught me as well. You have your camera, you have your negative, and then you have your print. photography is really nothing without a physical, tangible print. I have a lot of prints around the room to show you a lot of different portfolios that I've created over time. So this was a portfolio that I did, and I took me to many places, Paris, to Italy, to find statues in ancient Como. Como is a great resource of a lot, that's from Como statues. And even with black and white, then I would tone it, sepia tone, selenium tone, all different types of toning effects. So as I circle back to my first experience with photography, I'm in the dark room, learning chemistry with chemicals, hands in the chemicals, and, you know, with taking in one image at a time. Now, with digital, my computer is my dark room and is my enlarger. As Ansel said, it'd be fabulous to be able to lighten or darken a thin little area. We used to cut out holes in cardboard to darken or lighten an area. Oh, yeah, sure. So there's a collection of probably 30 of these images that were done over a number of years. I was working with a poet, a writer. We had the thought of maybe it's time for it, an inspirational book with these images and a little poetry of inspiration. It never got off the ground. This is a good example of infrared. Let's see if I can pull it up a little bit. Notice the grass behind the statue. It's you know, bright green grass. What is it? White, right? Because it's photosynthesizing with black. And this was done film. And the cypress trees also emit a glow. And the statue itself is glowing. There's a bright edge around here, around the statue. Now, this was quite a surprise. This is the magic of photography. That's the other thing why I photograph. I love magic, totally into that. Any of you been in a dark room? You start out with a blank sheet of paper. Oh my gosh, you put it in a chemical tray and woo, here comes an image. Well, that's what happened when this image popped up, because that statue is a solid black bronze statue. When you stand in front of it, you just see this ominous black angel statue with the white marble behind it. But look what happened after infrared shot it. That shoulders and arms must have been capturing light, heat and heat. Infrared film picks up and records heat. So it was like, whoa, look at that. It's really emanating. It's glory. And this little guy is in Watsonville Valley Church. It's about this big. I'm on the ground looking up to create a bigger presence, perspective. Again, with the infrared, it makes it glow. So that, I believe, are my black and white. So let's move to my next love and interest, which is color. Oh my gosh. And for color, it has to be flowers. One of the first thing I ever photographed, I don't know, how old was I? Little point and shoot camera. I even had a brownie at one time, is flowers. But flowers are, you know, not as easy as you may think. So I got a macro lens, and I learned how to do something called focus stacking, where I would take 10 to 15 images of the same flower. And okay, let's go back. I'm sorry, we got ahead of ourselves here. For example, that's a rosebud. Everybody's seen a rosebud, right? So rosebud, if this is a rosebud, you're going to have a point of focus here at the tip, one to the next petal, down to the next petal, down to the next petal. And when you take a close-up of that, the only thing in focus will be what's in the foreground. So take 10 images, change your focus point, and then they're stacked together with software. And I learned how to do that. I did that on some very tedious. afterwards, I thought, what else can I do with flowers? That would be fun. One of my great mentors, I love him. Maybe you're familiar with Jerry Olsman. Jerry Olsman has a technique of where, like Mickey was just talking about, you take an image, one image, and you basically double it. He showed you on the screen how he did that. This is exactly what I did to create this of a rose. This is a rose. Let me see if I can come in a little bit closer. Okay. So that's a photo of one rose that's been flopped over like a Rorschach. And guess what happens? Ooh, there's a whole other image within an image. And that's what happens when you're a photographer. You start seeing clear. You see images within images. And here with this road, it's very feminine. I titled it Goddess. And on this particular rose, there's a glow that's happening on the inside. So you have like a fan figure. Here's an angel. This is like a little creature. It's whatever you see. It's really whatever you see in it. So this body of work was called Floribunda and dahlias. Mostly was into dahlias and roses and a few other wildflowers. I also used a photo filter to make it look like a painting, to take that sharp edge off of it. And if you're into photographing flowers, capture them before they completely open, because when they open, it's a whole other element. This is another image of transformation tulips. I don't have the actual tulip to show you, but you can see it, the repeated pattern. They're like mandalas. And then I took it a step further. What else can I do to change this? To make it kind of interesting, I added a textured etching screen, and it really, see how it pops out on the black? And that's the center, which also has imagery within imagery. And here's a rose using photo stacking. And this is one of my fun little, I brought the print. I've made this small and bigger as well, my little fairy wild iris. Who would have thought you take a photo of an iris and you flop it over and you get this little creature, and you know, your imagination goes wild. I see like a little octopus with the eyes at the top, whatever, you know, and it's magic. It's that element of creating something from nothing. Oh, and I also grow roses. These are pretty much all my roses.
So Seraphina, are you photographing those on a black background, or are you just dropping the background off of it?
Good question. Yes, black background. I found perfect lighting in my dining room table in the afternoon where the light would come in from the sliding glass doors. And a rose is very small, so it's very easy to take a piece of 20 by 24 black cardboard and just set it up behind it. You guess what kind of flower this is? Yes, you know. Does it look like a dahlia? Oh my gosh, I thought it looked like a lotus, and it's a purple tip dahlia. And they're just incredible. Flowers are so incredible. Now, this is another flip-flop, 2 images put together, and I took some artistic license. I called this the Magi, because then I was sort of seeing a magician in the center with the third eye. Oh my gosh, here we go. What can I say? And the magician is playing with its thread and strings, and it's fun. It's just all fun. Something to do something different. And so this is a straight shot of a wild iris. So I position the camera. So pay attention to your background if you're out there photographing. Everything in your background is really crucial. So I made sure that other iris wasn't to the side. I wanted exactly in that spot. It took a bit of time. Then in my darkroom, which is the computer, I darkened all of this to black. This had a bunch of leaves and crap. I didn't like that. What I liked were the lines of the reeds on the right. I liked that movement, and I'll keep those two geranium leaves on the left, but I darkened it. That's something that, when you print, if you darken the edges, guess what happens when you look at that image? You're drawn into the center. You're drawn to the image. You're not looking over there at that beetle that's in the corner that happened to fly in, because you're the creator. I want you as a viewer to see what I felt, what I envisioned. And then this is a calla lily. And the calla lily also, again, has been doubled, called Heartland. This was one of my big sellers. I did open studios. These were printed in a small size also in 2024. I did all my own printing for years. Then I gave that up, figured Bay Photo can print it for a third of what I'm spending on ink and printers and cleaning the printer head. So what's going on here? The calla lily, which this is one right here, if you remember the shape, that's one, and then this is the other. And in the center, the yellow, I think it's Pensament, created a figure. I saw a figure. Thought, I need this figure, needs to be doing something. And then I placed a etching of a cone and fern leaves on the side. So that is my heart link, and moving on. And this is a very close-up image without any focus stacking. You can see why. The only thing in focus are the little tips of the dahlia. Everything else is blurred out. And again, with repeated patterns, come in close. So I'm not showing you the tips of the flowers or all of that. And here's the last one of this series, which is actually an iris with, sorry, you can see the etching of slight butterflies. And I had fun playing with edges and corners and doing that sort of thing. So moving on from flowers, then of course we have to get into color, landscapes, and portraiture and people. I visited Antelope Canyon. And once again, what is photography about? Light, yes, good students. Light. Number one, your subject is always about the light. Number two, subject, scene, background, but it's always light. And you know how I teach students to see the light? Very simple. You put your hand up to where the sun is, and you look at, this is how we used to expose from your hand. 18% gray is your hand. But when you turn around, you will see exactly how the light is hitting your scene, just by the palm of your hand. So with landscape photography, a lot was involved in going to the light, being at the place. And we've been to this spot a million times. It's probably billions of photographs taken, and it doesn't matter. Let me go back for a second. It doesn't matter. My good friend has helped me many times in saying, oh, this, everybody takes this picture. I don't want to take that picture. Everybody's been here. Everybody has the same picture. Ha! But you have not taken it. You have not made a creation here. Oh, that makes sense. I haven't done that, even though there are billions of images there. So look what happened on this day. Oh my gosh, there's a little bit of snow on Half Dome. The clouds are coming in. There's the moon. And oh my gosh, what a surprise. There's a rainbow that actually happening over Bridal Veil Falls. You see that on the left? See, move in. It's not going to do it for me, but there it is. So this became an image that I became very fond of. And this is another spot that I've been to many times, Valley View. Clear day with a bit of snow on the ground. And Yosemite again, setting sun, moon rising. Oh, here comes the moon. I can see part of the sliver. I just wait with the right timing. I'm going to get it. So it just looks like it's balancing on the rock, right? So these are things that one is seeing and experiencing. Whoops, sorry. And take the image in your mind's eye before you actually photograph it. That's my other point of philosophy. and photograph like crazy, photograph like there was no tomorrow, photograph like this is the last image you're going to take. This is the last plate of film you have. Remember, I only had 18 shots to take, even though now with my digital camera, I can take thousands, because then the other part of that saying, this is my motto, photograph like crazy, like there's no tomorrow, but be unattached to the results. Be 100% unattached to the result. That's really hard because, oh, I've traveled thousands of miles. I've gotten here. I've spent thousands of dollars. I've got to get this shot no matter what. But what do you think that does to one? It narrows your view, creates stress, worry. It locks you into not creating. Question.
Yeah, that amazing shot of the moon at the top of the.
Yes,
peak,
yes.
Did you take dozens of shots before and after just to get it?
Yeah, I have not really dozens. It happened pretty quick as I recall. But this was the one, right?
Yeah, I mean, to get that.
And this is digital. This is digital. And that's another wonderful thing. I love like, Mickey was saying, night photography. And the sun is setting and the moon is rising. So your landscape is lit and you also have the moon in the frame. I'm going to share with you also some night photography, but yes, these are the best that are picked out of many hundreds. So, and here, this was a big surprise. I'm at Big Sur, Little Sur River. As you come around the bend, there's a place you can go up and park, and there's a fence below you. And I love this spot. And I take a couple pictures, and I was not aware of what was happening in the background. I thought I had a smudge on my lens. No, really, I'm cleaning. I'm cleaning. And then when I got it home and looked on the laptop and could see, oh my gosh, there are two whales spouting. So the surprise, the magic of photography, because you don't really know what you're going to get. And here, a lovely sunset at Julia Pfeiffer Burns, one of the 2 locations in California coast where the water actually hits the ocean. Point Lobos, one of our favorite, our jewel, California jewel with the beautiful coves. And this is from the other side. How many of you ever been to Point Lobos? Oh, good. Most of you have experienced it. It's a real treasure. Great hiking place. Point Lobos, once again, on the left, the gnarly tree covered in this lichen moss, which, by the way, does not kill the tree. It looks like it is. The ranger assured me that it's not that red-orange you've probably seen. And now another great spot, Mono Lake, which is a surreal place, great place for also night photography, which I will be sharing with you. What you see on the side, those are called tufas. Tufas, it's calcification forms that just keep coming out of the water. Mono Lake is one of the saltiest bodies of water around, and they have mineral springs that bubble up, and that bubbling up creates these tufas. Okay, let's get to my next. So my husband says, yeah, it's great, you're doing all these pictures, but we're going broke. You're spending too much money. We need to make some money of this, right? Okay, so I started photographing people. Believe me, I did headshots, I did business shots, I did all types of things to draw income. Weddings, big money in weddings. However, I became known as a romantic portrait artist. And with that, when clients would come, I was not a high volume portrait photographer. I would spend a lot of time with my clients on the phone. What are your interests? Oh, I have a beautiful white horse. Really? Can we photograph you with the white horse? So we did this shot, her and her friends, and then we did this shot. She goes, my horse always thought to be like a unicorn. Well, we made the horse into a unicorn. This was in the this is film, by the way, all film. We painted it on the print. We painted it with white paint. So before digital, imaging, I would paint on the surfaces of photographs. So I got into doing fantasy type of romantic images. A wedding couple, their engagement session. This is in Watsonville. That castle is still there. Maybe some of you have seen it. And that lot now is probably built up with a home, but you know, in the Cinderella Prince Charming outfit. This was in Wales. I've taught to the Royal British Academy of England. It was great fun. And I had, this is one of the students, put her in one of my costumes, pouring rain. Now, no, really, it was. And she's sitting on plastic. Other photographers have umbrellas under me, and there's a guy on the side with an umbrella over her, and I'm ready to go. Okay, he'd run and I take the shot. So the background was very misty, and I'm going to zoom in. You see this texturing? That is a texturing that I started to use on prints to make it look like an old painting. And this background was also completely grayed out. You barely saw the outline. Took my watercolor paint. And if anybody's ever done black and white, you would use something called photo flow. What is photo flow? It's a slippery, slimy substance that you would add once you develop your film to make it really slick, and you can wipe the water off and let your film strip dry. I would add photo flow to my paint so I could make a nice watercolor wash, and the watercolor doesn't stick. I could have a little bit of leeway. This is another workshop. Photographer dressed her up in a white gown, put her, you know, in front of, this was in Wales, waterfall, and a time exposure. If you do a waterfall, it has to be a long exposure. You want a dreamy water effect, right? And also in Wales, inside a barn, all natural light. And the only light that's coming from is the barn door window. Pardon?
I said, this is your Vermeer.
Yes, Vermeer, exactly. Exactly. Oh, good point. Thank you for bringing that up. I studied the painters. Maybe some of you have studied, you know, Michelangelo, Vermeer, Raphael, Joseph Sargent for the portraits. Now, a mother and daughter do the Renaissance fair. And they said, oh, maybe you can take some pictures of me and our gypsy wagon. Yes, with horses. Yes, went to LA, and oh boy, the gypsy wagon was around a billion things of clutter and the horses, but this was coming into the frame. And you can notice it's taken at an angle to use this to offset the initial, and then here's the mom. So, and there were many other gypsies around. I took many images. We had a great photo shoot. Now in the studio, I would create scenes and sets in the studio to depict different times and eras, and that would be according to the client. And one of my big things, even to this day, and I pass this on to each of you, please be like a child, play, have fun. We must look and see the world through a child's eye. We become so involved with life and stress and everything. But when they came into the studio, in order for me to capture an image that truly represented who they were, to show their inner beauty, we needed to play. We needed to have fun. And guess what? I also would guarantee my work. I would say, you know, if it doesn't work out, say you have a mom and baby, and baby's crying and the mom is going crazy, or little Johnny, you know, is running in my studio, tearing everything apart. I become the bad guy and sergeant and control him. And guess what? Johnny goes, somebody told me what to do. But it worked. I mean, it worked. I got pictures, and this is another on location. So I started out as a landscape photographer. Why not put people in beautiful scenes, in beautiful landscapes? Guess what? I'm going to make more sales. My business was dependent upon sales. If they liked the picture, they would buy it. And guess what? Probably 80 to 85% of people that came to see their picture hated it. Hated an image of themselves, particularly women. It was really sad. And I asked my husband, I said, he goes, well, you know, they just really want reassuring. I said, yeah, but I can't say that's a beautiful picture. This is, you know, this is really what, and they go, that's me, that's really me. And so I learned a technique. I did have a minor in psychology. I graduated. Anybody been in sales? You need psychology. You really need psychology. So I would project one of my favorite images, and I'd tell them, they're sitting in a room. I did not use proofs. I learned that you don't send out a book with proofs anymore. You want to have this eye contact. And I'd say, you know, you really, this is the one picture that really hit me. You may not like it. And then I would describe it like an art teacher. So it's subjective. Look at the lines involved. Look at your gaze, you know, or say something like, look at your eyes, how they're reflecting. And I would talk about it like it's not really them. And then here's the big secret. Leave the image, project it on the screen, and walk out of the room. I'll be right back. I'll be right back. Sneeze the bathroom. Come back in 2-3 minutes. And that image has been embedded in their brain. And then they go, are there any other images? Oh, yeah. And I showed them all the images. And, you know, and I just say, that's just me. That as, you know, that's because I already shared with him the artistic, you know, qualities of the same location, same shoot with a, you know, with the young man being, you know, very studly. And my costumes, I tell you, I have tons of costumes. And this is also at the Palace of Fine Arts. There's actually steps. You can actually climb up there like that. So what do you do with two people that are just sitting on this precipice? And it was a bit of a challenge. So I situated them so they were looking away. And then I purposefully had her elbow up. I don't know. It's all an experiment. You know, you really need to be intuitive, go with the feel of what your client's going to do for you. And then I'm totally into mythology. And here we are at Palace Fire. I said, you're going to be Persephone. Take on, embody Persephone with a pomegranate. Put her in a costume. And of course, I do images looking at you, looking very beautiful and pretty so you can see the face. But it varies, you know, what you do. And believe it or not, I sold this image. Do you think you could sell a portrait with somebody's eyes closed? Why do you think they liked that? It's a feeling, an expression that you never see yourself with your eyes closed, for one thing. This image is over here. And this I call 3 Faces of Eve. This was done with film. And this was so much work. These are individual prints done with film. I cut the edging, mounted it on dry mount. And then this is actually art paper. And you can see the client couldn't decide which one she liked because if you see on here, she is looking, she's looking away, but the mirrored image is looking at you. So this was actually reversed. She's lying like this on the mirror, on the side. And then I flipped it. You know, you have license to flip images upside down, inside out, whatever. And this one, notice, she's actually looking at us. And then this one, she's gazing away. So 3 Faces of Eve, no problem. I'll create something special for you. There it is. Then again, this is a process that I started to do where Bay Photo, thank you so much, would take a print, strip it from the plastic surface, and then actually attach it to canvas. And this is also a big selling aid. They go, really? Yes, I'm creating a painting for you like a canvas. And they take that, feel it. They would that's a selling point. You actually feel the surface of the texture and you can see it.
You want me to pass this around?
Sure, pass it around. Thank you. You sell a canvas portrait today. No.
Yeah.
You've got to, you know, I never was a salesman. I never was really interested in that, but you have to make a living. You have to somehow support your habit. Habit. Mother and daughter, and mothers, they're always fussing over their children, always, doesn't matter how old it is. Smile, Johnny, smile, smile. So you have a beautiful picture of the kid and the mother looks horrible. So again, this was a transition. I would spend 3 hours with my clients and have them bring a lot of outfits. Another key, the more outfits you change them into, the more sales, because they got to get a picture in every outfit. Us ladies, we love our clothes. So I have Victorian furniture situated, the young baby and the mother. And hands in portraiture are really important, as well as feet. And, you know, who was the star of this session? The baby. Why not crop the mother out and just work on featuring the baby, right? Cropping is another big thing. If you've done documentary work or work for a newspaper, cropping is so important. You know, like here, this was, I was teaching for the professional photographers of Mexico. We're at a ranchero, and the father comes out and the daughter, and of course she looks like a you know, black leather, high heels, stockings, and I have in my mind to portray the culture, the people, right? And she goes, yeah, I have an attire that used to be my mom's, so I got them in that costume and created that memorable father-daughter portrait for them. This is in Italy in a archway, all natural light. And this fellow came in for a portrait session, headshot, and I put him in Anthony, created the set. I'm going to move quickly because I'm going to be running out of time. I wanted to share with you a glamour. Glamour was very, very popular, very lucrative to have women come. Usually it was for their boyfriend or husband to look sexy. And it was always done very, very tastefully. Now this gal brought her pet. Very difficult to work with. You try moving a boa constrictor. And there's my other set again with a gal with a chemise. So now this is my claim to fame. You turn the light on. Guardian of Spheres, and it hangs at Oklahoma City permanent collection of photography. And I had a show there years ago. This is done with that effect with the canvases circling around. And the screening is done in a lab on film. Mortensen from LA, he worked in cinema. He developed this texture screen. So if you're in the darkroom, you have your print and you have a big piece of acetate that have all these lines on it. Anyway, claim to fame, Guardian of Spheres, and then I created this with two twins, and that was the only shot I can get of them because they're running around. Close your eyes, you're asleep. What? Close your eyes. Snap. And this is another treatment using that. So then moving on from color and portraiture, I retired from that. And then I had time to spend looking at the stars and doing a lot of night photography, which was an adventure. It took me places I would never have gone. So it's basically landscape photography, but you're at night. Boy, challenges at night. Well, once you figure out how to expose for night, and I took some studio lights out there at night to light the foreground when you're in pitch black, because most of this works great under a new moon, which means there's no light at all out there. You might recognize this location. This is taken from the wharf, Capitola Wharf. Here we are at Natural Bridges, and to find a dark location is also very hard. That bridge is being lit by all the homes that are behind me. And the Milky Way was amazing. It was somewhat of a clear night, and this reflection, there's a boat going past there. My exposures, you're dependent. It's a fine line. You can't go too fast because then the stars are blurry, too slow, then it's too dark. So this was our lunar eclipse moon in Capitola. And I have a whole series of these. And then this was kind of a coming home after a photo shoot at Davenport, and my driver, I'm going, stop. I go, what? Look. I could see the Milky Way and this white band across the horizon. What? That is so unique. So we stopped, and the camera was all set up. Hold the tripod, you throw it in the back trunk, pop the camera down, and one of the things that with night photography is I would focus to infinity, lock it in there, just focus to infinity. And here you have Mars reflecting in the water. This is one of my favorite images. And then Big Sur with star trails. Star trails are so fun. What are star trails? You go find the North Star and you put your camera on an automatic shoot for 2 hours. You end up with maybe, 150 shots, and then you put them all together. You just sandwich them all together. You got 150 layers in Photoshop, and there is a function, you go bing, and puts it all together. You just have to know the function to do to create. And this was a fun night. I went with Bob. We got the 7 phases of the total eclipse of the moon at Walton Lighthouse. Bob was so great. Hauled my wagon. We got stuck in the snow, the sand. I had so much equipment. So this is a composite, right? This is not what you see. You would see a movement from here over to here. And there were many others in between, but just to give you the feel of the phases of the moon. Here we are at Davenport, and I really like this image because of the other lights. Here's the photographer with their headlamp. Here's another photographer, and there's a big fire pit down, and I had to wait a long time and was prayed that that fire pit would die down because it just filled the whole bottom with red light. It was overwhelming. So you have a lot of challenges at night. And I really like this print. A meteor shower. Anybody ever photograph a meteor shower? Okay, this is like 2-3 hours, 4 hours. You're not going to see all these meteors coming down like, whoo, at once. That's what I thought at first. No. So this is basically a composite of the same scene with these meteors superimposing. And I kind of like this one up at top, and so many, I don't know if I can do this, but at the top, this has a rainbow. There's actually a color. There's a little pink, little yellow, green. And that's how you can tell it's not a plane. Now we move to New Mexico, a drier area, and it's quite a place because this is, again, star trails, and I'm lighting the scene. I am lighting the scene with lights. I have assistants, they walk around, and otherwise this would be totally black, right? And I've also, there's a technique that I will photograph the foreground at sunset and then do the background an hour later and then sandwich the two together. There's 2 ways. This one, there are people walking around this for 2 hours with lights. You don't even see them. And Chaco Canyon, National Historic Spot. This canyon again is lit. And here's another one. We lit inside it, and this one we liked a lot. I mean, I liked it a lot. It was a challenge. We spent all day going through a lot of the cubicles in the kiva to find the one that would have the Milky Way at the top, and then lit it. Moonbow. Anybody ever seen a moonbow at Yosemite or photographed a moonbow without the camera and a a polarizing filter? You would see a silver haze. But with the camera, most hard thing I've ever done, like photographing in a shower, you are pelted constantly with water. The exposure was just probably maybe a minute because you got the dreamy water, but then it took 5 to 6 minutes to clean your lens and to Yosemite. And this is the Olmsted Point, Milky Way with the setting, is it moon? Actually, yeah, setting moon, right, setting moon, and Mono Lake Pano. So in June, the Milky Way at a dark sky location, Mono Lake, it'll be from here to here. So this consisted, there's a lot of ways to do it, of about 5-6 images. And then you piece them together, Mono Lake again, with a little bit, how much time do I have?
Not much.
Not much. And Mono Lake, Joshua Tree. We thought I'd have fun lighting up the center of the eyeball so that. And this is Mount Shasta and Trinity Alps. And then I played around with statues at night. And this is a statue with the Milky Way. Before I end, I do have a whole bunch of birds, but I think I'm running out of time. I'll just show you a few and not do the whole show. And then I wanted to end with where I'm at right now. So I've had a lot of experience. I've created whole different types of thing. It's one thing in life leads you to another. So let me just share a few birds and then I'll share my latest work. First bird I ever photographed was a condor up at high peaks. I basically have a wide angle. I mean, this is taken at about 50 millimeters, right? It's another condor. And then like my name, the grebes. These are the dancing grebes. I had to go find the dancing grebes. And egrets were just quite a joy. Egret doing yoga. And then who would ever think that a great blue heron would contort itself in such a manner? I mean, that's sort of the joy. And then another love, they're sandhill cranes. They're absolutely incredible. I would highly recommend Merced Wildlife Refuge. And there's, of course, sunrise, sunset, and then our little owl friends. We love owls. But what I'd like to end is where I'm at now. And I've been asked to do a number of illustrations. And the illustrations started actually with this image. And this was done years ago. It's actually a sculpture of a fountain. And it's water falling over faces. It's you go to a water fountain, it's a flat surface and their faces. I took a picture of that and it transformed me. I saw the surrealness. This is done in Wales with a face in the rock print and egret wings in the sky, composites. So now I am creating collages, montages of images. And from there, it progressed to, this is like with the angels and the statues, I started working with color, space images, completely contorting everything around. Now, I don't put angels in the sky. Why not? I belong to a healing circle, and this is what we do to take care of us as a community. And then uplifting souls, I got into planets and stars and just let my imagination go wild. And it was fun. For 2 months, I was in a wheelchair, unable to move barely. And I was in front of the computer and I thought, what can I do different? What can I create that is uplifting to me? And I love owls, so I had to do Rhapsody of Owls with them in the clouds and in the sky. And they take a lot of time because one thing will develop into the other. And I thought, I want an array of owls, barn owl, long-eared owl, saw-wheat owl, the great horned owl, and I love parrots. So now I'm working on images that will be cards of some sort, all square. I created the border from the macaw, from the wings, and flamingos, long necks. This probably has 50 layers in it. Each object is a layer in Photoshop. So I had to learn technique. That's the one thing, if you want to learn technique, Mark, you have a project, have something to do that's going to push you. How can I do that? How can I blend this bird into that background to fade out or to be light. In Photoshop, I started doing that in 2020. There's so many ways of doing the same thing, so many ways. And ospreys are pretty amazing. We have our local osprey, but they're worldwide. They're absolutely, I put a little name plaque on the bottom to give them, and the Knight of the Dark Soul, the Raven. I just love the Raven and how to get a moon in there. And so there's different elements that come up as I create these. And here's King Penguin. Oh, to King Penguin. Oh my God, there he is. It's the, and of course, dolphins love dolphins. They're so fun and create a lot of joy and love. And they've always been keeping me, remember, be as a child, play, have fun. That is your key to growth and, to try to be happy, even, in hard times. I went to a museum and fell in love with the mirrors and all of the squares. And there we are having our eyeball. So that's it, folks. Thank you very much.
Okay, couple of quick questions for Seraphina. Anybody questions here?
Are you having any workshops soon?
Oh, all right. Oh, thank you. I do group workshops, I do personal workshops. And yes, I always have something going on. If you're interested, just ask me, let me know. I do have business cards here and I have prints for sale. I have an overabundance from Open Studios. They're $25. If anybody is interested. Thank you. Oh, and there's the canvas print.
There's the camera.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Seraphina's amazing. I've taken one of her workshops. It was worth every penny. I've only been tuning for 2 years, and she has been very supportive. And she tells me, Ansel Adams says, if it's not integral to the photo process.
Okay, well, thank you for coming and you take a look at the prints in the back of the room. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
That was great. Hey, one quick question about your building. A lot of color.